Hi guys, it's Nina from VR Focus and I am joined by...
Steve Lane. I'm technical lead and sound designer at GCRS, which is a virtuality specific based arm of the company for Grand Central Recording Studios.
So, one of the biggest problems when it comes to 360 film is I assume that a lot of filmmakers come to you and they say, we've got this awesome film, we've made sure that everything is coordinated, it took a lot of time, a lot of money, and you're like, the sound is terrible, and they want you to fix it.
Yeah, that happens quite a lot.
What is the problem with 360 film and sound?
Well, I guess the starting point is that a lot of people will go ahead and shoot the audio on the set without having really thought about the processes involved. It's a very different beast to shooting a normal piece of film or a non-360 piece of film, because you have to factor in so many things like, okay, where should I put this microphone? Do I need to mic up every person individually? And there's a lot of things that need to be thought about, like where can you hide microphones? Because a lot of the time you'd be able to use a boom mic to be able to get a nice recording of somebody, which is an impossibility with 360, depending on how you shoot it. So there's been a couple of films that we've been involved really early in the process, and they've had to actually change the thought behind the film, more for branding stuff than actual a piece of film that somebody's written, but just to say, look, we're going to need to have a microphone close to this person or close to this object, and then that can get written into the treatment. Personally, I tend to ask people, or if we're doing a record ourselves, I'll record on set with clip mics for all the actors so I can get clean dialogue. I'll generally use an ambisonic mic or a 360 mic above the camera. That gives me more of a reference to what I want it to sound like when it comes to the post process. But I very rarely will use the 360 capture because it gives you very little creative control over what you can and can't do. So I tend to have a listen to it, listen to the environment, and then recreate everything in post. To do that, I've got to use various pieces of software that allow you to place things within a 360 environment. Lots of work needs to be done on the reverb, on the room size, to make sure that what you're hearing is matching what you're seeing. And it's quite a long, drawn-out process, but if you get it right, then it can be done. It can make a great.
What is the software that you are using for 360?
Well, we use a couple of different software suites. We have some of our own tools, and then we also use a company called Blue Ripple, who are very, very good, and we've known the guys behind that for several years, and they work in high order ambisonics, which is what the studio here runs in. There are other ones we've used over the past. It's essential to have a solid workflow, and that includes having a video player that can sync up and have that you can watch back in headsets, because when I first started working on 360, I was working not in the headset because there just wasn't anything in place that allowed you to sync up your audio to your video in real time, and it's very difficult to work out perspective. When you then put the headset on, you realise that everything is very different to what you thought it was going to be. We learnt very early on that we needed a solid workflow in place where I can sit and sound design and mix in headset, which gets a bit laborious at times because
that
you're
must be quite
having to
confusing though. If you
it
put
can
on
be
the headset and you're trying to do the sound because you can't see what buttons you're
Yes,
clicking.
it is a problem.
Is there a virtual reality or a 360 software application where you can change the sound?
There is.
In?
Yes, there
Yes?
is. Yeah, there's a few now actually that they've started to become readily more available. I still find it much easier to use what I'm used to, which is a mouse and keyboard and a desk. But it does give you flexibility where I can do X amount of my preparation and track laying and design in a traditional way, and then go into the headset and do mixing and final tweaking and panning in that environment. Also, there is we had an old DK2, which this was back in the day when nothing really was available, and we don't use it anymore. So I've kind of taken the front off of that to allow me to look through and still have the head tracking facility. So that's a bit of a bodge job to make that work. And sometimes I'll just have to hold it and move it around, but there's only so much you can do in the headset before you either start to get neck ache or just need to step back into the real world for a little bit. But that's part and parcel of the workflow and what needs to be done.
And so for 360 film and microphones, is there a limit on how many microphones you can put on people and try and figure out where they are? Because if say there's a scene with, I don't know, 36 people and they all have a line and you can't cut because it's VR.
Yeah.
How would you handle the amount of microphones, the amount of information, and I guess also maybe if everything's wireless, if it's all going into.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential challenges to overcome there. If there's 36 people, I'd be tempted to do a lot of it in post-sync because you're going to get, unless they're all isolated, you're going to get crosstalk even from lapels. It's still going to sound a little bit messy, environmental noise and everything like that. I guess it just depends on the situation, but there is an option to do post-syncing, and with the tools that you can then treat it to make sure it sounds like it's in the environment afterwards. Which I tend to prefer to do anyway. It just depends if the actors are good enough to do good post-sync, because that's a whole other skill set in itself. There's always a way around it. You just have to find the way. And that's kind of one of the exciting things about 360 video. There isn't a right or wrong way to do it. Everybody's still experimenting, and some things will work and some things won't work. I mean, I worked on a piece which was set up in the middle of a massive crowd, and there was horses racing around. And they gave me the video, and I was like, "Oh, can you send me the audio that you recorded?" And they just recorded. It was GoPro rigs, and they just recorded the audio, just with one of the GoPro cameras, and it was just this mess of mono audio, with people screaming and horse racing and just lots of stuff going on. And it was actually not in English language either. It was based in another country. So I thought, okay, so we've got 360 camera, people all around us cheering on, saying things in another language. Like, what do we do here? So luckily I know a sound designer in the country in question, and he'd actually, weirdly enough, been to that event the year before and recorded some crowds. So we asked him, and he gave us his crowds. And then we had some people, native language speakers, come in and just literally had to say, right, what do you think this person's saying here? And work it out, lip read it, and then go into the booth and try and re-record it, make it fit, place it in the environment. And what started off as potentially a relatively straightforward process actually ended up being quite laborious. And then after that was done, you need to start putting in each of the individual horses as they went past.
Now, how would they have prepared the audio better?
I don't know if they could have, really, to be honest. It's just that type of film. I think maybe if you'd taken a 360 mic and put it on the camera, at least then you could use that for a majority of the close people. The people that you're focusing on, you could kind of use the audio for that, and that would kind of work. But then it just depends how noisy is the environment. There's no right or wrong. There's no way of knowing if what you're doing is going to be correct, really. So,
do you have any, like, maybe top 3 tips that you would give filmmakers out there and people who want to do sound for 360? Like, these are things I advise you to do.
My number one tip is, whoever's going to do your sound, get them involved as early as possible. It's fundamental, because they'll know things that you may not, and you may be able to give them information that would help work out how the process is going to be. The earlier the better. I mean, that applies to every medium, really, but especially in 360. Second is, try and make sure your environment where you're shooting is as quiet as possible. Obviously, again, it's very specific to jobs. Sometimes you have to record audio in a very noisy environment, but basically, if you have to use the audio that you record on the shoot, what it sounds like on the day is what you're going to have to use. And when it comes to 360, if you've recorded one person talking in a really noisy environment and you want to pan it to them, so as they're moving around, it's following around, their dialogue's going to go with them, but also all the noise and the atmosphere is going to go with them as well. So isolation is kind of key. And I guess the third one would be, make sure that whoever is recording your sound knows what they're doing, because there's a whole new set of tools, microphones, techniques, and I've done 360 videos that have been recorded by sound technicians who are very good but haven't done 360 video before, and they could have done it in a different way to achieve a better result. Yeah.
And are there maybe like 3 points that you'd say just avoid doing that for 360 film? I advise you not to do that.
I don't know. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think everything's worth trying. I don't think there's anything that you shouldn't do apart from record lots of horses in a really noisy environment. But no, I think there isn't anything you shouldn't do. There's always a way to make something better, or at least to adapt it to get a better result. I guess it kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve. That's the great thing about 360 video, is that I've seen documentaries, I've seen short films, I've seen educational videos, which for me personally is where I think it's really going to shine. I've seen health videos, and all of them come from a very different background, but using the same medium to share their message. And each one needs to be approached slightly differently depending on the content. I'd hate to say 3 things that people shouldn't do, because I wouldn't want people to stop or suggest people should stop experimenting. I think that's fundamental to a new medium like 360. People are having to approach it in a completely different way. They're having to, instead of writing a script or writing a script for 360, they should be writing a script or a piece of content and then deciding if 360 is the correct medium for it. It shouldn't be shoehorned in. Some things don't work in 360 and some do. And I've worked on a piece where it's obvious the client has said, can you make me something in 360 please? And it's been done and it was okay, but it wasn't fit for purpose for the medium. And that's fine because they're experimenting and trying things out. But I guess people like creatives and script writers are having to come at it with a whole new mindset of like what can and can't be done, because essentially you're shooting multiple scenes in one. We're not focusing on one specific image now. You need to be able to make sure that wherever the person is looking, there's something to engage them, or if there is action going on there, then the audio needs to match that action. Because if you have a main character talking in an environment and the person's looking around and there's something going on over to one side and the audio's not there, then it's like, okay, well, this isn't what I'm watching or listening to. So there's a lot to think about.
So where do we go if we have some questions about 360 sound and might need some help?
Of course, yeah, we're always happy to help. We want to push audio in VR as much as possible, so if there's questions, please feel free. You can go to GCRS.com, which is our main website, and on there you can find links to our various advertising work, but also to our VR webpage as well.
And that is always extremely useful to have some experts in the field to talk to. And head over to vrfocus.com if you want to find out more about virtual reality. And I will see you there.